Hello again. This is Bob Ford with Bob Ford's History, Mystery, and Lore. Today, we are talking about the disturbing Glore Psychiatric Museum. Let's get started. Visiting the Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri is an emotional experience. Let me hear from you if you've been there before. You will be staggered by some of the perverse devices professionals use to treat people. The disbelief in past treatments is put into perspective by Dr. James Reynolds, the former medical director of the Northwest Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center in St. Joseph, commonly referred to as Hospital Number 2. They truly thought with the resources they had, they were helping people. One of the disciplines of the Hippocratic Oath is first do no harm. I think some of the old doctors must have fallen asleep that day in medical school and missed it completely. A few of the devices used on patients are still on display at the museum were inhumane, medieval, torturous, and sadistic. Now with those adjectives out of the way, let's move on to the contraptions themselves. First up, the stockade. This treatment dates back to the 16th and 17th century and is about confinement. Many of the oddly acting people had bad blood or were raised improperly, don't you know? A little bloodletting and public humiliation in the town square for days on end should do the trick. Bloodletting was thought to remove the impurities from the body. The hollow wheel. The wheel is basically a hamster wheel for humans, used in the 17th and 18th century to run the demons out of your system. They would put a poor soul in there for 36 to 48 hours, obviously breaking bones and in no doubt killing patients. The bath of surprise. Early hydrotherapy. Today, it's used in carnivals and festivals and called a dunk tank. In history, it was used to shock the system into producing better blood. The douching tube. It's a form of waterboarding, which is used to interrogate prisoners to gain information very successfully. Used in historic treatments to shock the body, relieving one of their demons with large streams of very cold water in the face for a long period of time. The tranquilizer chair. This was developed by Benjamin Rush, who should be better remembered for signing the Declaration of Independence. Rush was before his time and considered the father of American psychology. This chair, however, leaves you speechless. Patients would be confined in this thing for months. Really, how could something like this be considered therapeutic even in the 18th century? So many of these devices and treatments fortify the ability of people back then to totally detach themselves from others. No empathy or connection was made to the treatment of slaves or the crazies. How could one human not have feelings for the mistreatment of another? That still bewilders me. And most of the perpetrators considered themselves Christians. The O'Halloran twirling box. One would be strapped in for hours and twirled, forcing your blood through centrifugal force to go to the outer parts of your body, flinging your blood and cleansing it. I find it difficult even talking about this stuff. Imagine the absolute pain and suffering inflicted on poor misunderstood victims. It is man's inhumanity to man. Dr. Reynolds is right, however. What will others think of current treatments today with the ability to look back 50 years? 1 in 6 Americans are on antidepressants, with science just now understanding the side effects of long-term use. Of course, most of our psychological prescriptions have to deal with the almighty dollar. Big Pharma has control of Congress and the agency that is supposed to be regulating them. It's all about politics and profit. We need to, of course, acknowledge that the devices on display at the Glore Psychiatric Museum are purposefully shocking. The museum's goal is both to inform and entertain, after all. However, the reality of being a mental hospital patient in the early 1900s was even more bleak. Well, let's talk about gaslighting and why a lot of patients were in there in the first place. Gaslighting is defined as a form of psychological manipulation in which the abuser attempts to sow self-doubt and confusion in their victims' minds, seeking to gain control over the other person by distorting reality and forcing them to question their own judgment and self-worth. It happened in my family. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, gaslighting was perfected by wealthy white men who wanted to separate from their wives. It was too scandalous to just get a divorce. It was far easier to get them committed to a mental institution, Cammie Jones tells me. Just concoct a little mental problem at home like depression, uncleanliness, or antisocial behavior, and you're in. Women didn't stand a chance. My great aunt, Harriet Arnold, was living the life. Daughter of famed Native American artifact collector Harry George, she had married Henry Arnold, who was a Shell Oil executive in charge of developing the Caspian Sea oil. Those fields made Shell Oil. Hitler was after that Caspian Sea production and Romania's Ploiești oil deposits when his army was stopped at the 1943 Battle of Stalingrad, turning the tide of World War II. I've seen pictures of Harriet skiing in Innsbruck, lounging on the Riviera, and yachting down the Danube in the 1920s. She had it all. Then she got pregnant, came back to St. Joseph to have the baby. Henry Jr. was born in her sister's house, my grandmother's, on Lover's Lane in St. Joseph, Missouri, in the same house and bedroom where my father was born. Things quickly went downhill. Who knew what was going on in Europe with her husband? And Henry would come back periodically. But my father said Harriet was accused of smothering her baby. The child was fine, but taken away by Henry. Harriet, of course, fiercely reacted, and into an asylum she went. Cammie Jones says, wear whatever clothes you want them buried in when they arrive, because they're not going to get better and they're not going home. At the time, the law was if a spouse had been institutionalized for over a year, a divorce could be granted without a hearing. How simple. Harriet, now divorced, had gone from frequently the La Scala Opera House in Milano, Italy, to an asylum in St. Joseph, Missouri in only a few years. Nellie Bly was one of those important early 20th century women who challenged norms. She did many things, but as a reporter for the New York World, got herself committed to a woman's insane asylum to report on the deplorable conditions. If you weren't crazy going in, you would become so in a short amount of time, her book stated. That book is 10 Days in a Madhouse. It describes torture, filth, tranquilization, rape, malnutrition as a daily struggle in this inhumane place, much of it brought on because someone would not conform or a husband simply wanted out of a marriage. If the patient continued to cause problems inside the institution, soon there would be a new ultimate solution offered or ordered: a lobotomy. On the men's side, think of the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. Because of Nellie Bly and other high-profile patients, namely Rosemary Kennedy, JFK's sister, laws began to change. In 1963, Kennedy got the Community Health Care Act passed, and that led to the structured release of nearly half of the 600,000 citizens institutionalized in America. My father, Jake Ford, was a good man. Prior to 1963, he got Aunt Harriet out. I'm sure it took a little money and a lot of influence, but all of a sudden as a kid, we had someone new showing up at all family gatherings at holidays. She wasn't right, but after years in, who would be? Old, confused, very vulnerable, but now she was part of the family. Her son came back once and promised to now always be in her life. He never returned. Harriet lived out the rest of her days at the stately Roubidou Hotel in downtown St. Joseph, and then a nursing home. Gaslighting has evolved, but it's still about control. Divorce is painful, but the social stigma is far less. We all know of couples where a degree of gaslighting is playing out. It continues to be about mental manipulation and dominance. The abuser and the victim are many times complicit, but the effect their interactions have on their children keep therapists busy. If you've had any relationship with someone that's been gaslighted, comment. I'd love to hear about it. Stop by the Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri, and learn, but be prepared. What you're about to see just may keep you up nights. This video is a salute to the life of my great aunt, Harriet George Arnold, and a tip of the hat to my father, Jake Ford. This video is sponsored by Nottoway Valley Bank, voted one of Missouri's strongest banks, and it's right here in Northwest Missouri. It's my bank. For more information on them, check the links below. Thank you all for watching. If you found this video interesting, please like and subscribe. Also consider becoming a patron for more exclusive historical content. All my videos go up to patron members several days early. Becoming a patron is truly the best way to support my channel. Comment below if you have a historical topic you'd like me to cover next. You can find my podcast for Bob Ford's History, Mystery, and Lore, link below. We will see you next time. Bob Ford out.